Hi, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't already done so, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. I am the author of the upcoming book, The Only Witness, A History of the Shroud of Turin. It is a historical fiction tracing a possible, yet plausible history of the Shroud over the last 2 millennia. Today we'll be speaking with Brian Hyland. He's the Associate Curator of Manuscripts at the Museum of the Bible, where he was responsible for the new Shroud exhibit at the museum. But before we get started, I wanted to tell a short story. I was just in Washington, D.C. A week and a half ago and visited the Museum of the Bible, where the Shroud exhibit was launched. It is a fantastic exhibit. I was most impressed with a linen reproduction of the Shroud, and it is just fascinating to see. All of the image and the bloodstains are represented in a 14-foot long by 4-foot high linen cloth. As part of the launch as well, Russ Brialt, Andrew Casper, Cheryl White, Barry Schwartz, Father Spitzer, and of course Brian Hyland spoke and gave their remarks about the Shroud and about the exhibit. Each of them spoke on topics from the 1978 STIRP project, to the image formation mechanism, to Jesus as artwork, and to the Shroud being a piece of art. Of course, not being a piece of art from the hand of man, but being a piece of art from the hand of God. If you get a chance, definitely plan a trip to Washington, D.C. and visit the Shroud exhibit at the Museum of the Bible before July of this year, before it's gone. With that, let me introduce Brian Hyland. Brian is the Associate Curator of Manuscripts at Museum of the Bible, where he researches the museum's medieval and ancient manuscripts. Brian holds an MA in Ancient History from the University of Chicago and a BA in History from the University of Maryland, College Park. He has also studied classics at Cornell University and papyrology at the Institut für Papyrologie Ruprecht Karls Universität in Heidelberg, Germany. For 30 years, Brian taught Latin, German, social studies, and mythology at Seton Catholic Central High School in Binghamton, New York. He has also taught Greek and Roman history at the University of Illinois, Chicago, medieval history for the University of Maryland's European Extension Division, and Latin at Binghamton University. Brian is a veteran performer who plays traditional Irish music on penny whistle, flute, English and Anglo concertinas, button and piano accordions, harmonica, bodhran, and the bones. Fantastic stuff. Well, Brian, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Guy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with your background. As we were talking before the call, we were at University of Chicago about the same time, maybe a little bit of overlap, maybe not. And then also we were both in Germany. So kind of an interesting overlap of backgrounds. So why don't we get started? Why don't you tell us a little bit of your backstory on how you came to the Museum of the Bible?
Well, the story really begins with my experience at Chicago and Heidelberg. I had finished all my coursework for a PhD from Chicago, and I had won a stipend to go and study at the University of Heidelberg and to study papyrology there. And while I was in Heidelberg, I was taking seminars, and one of the fellow students in the seminar was a guy by the name of David Trobisch. So I had a bad 48 hours where all my funding ran out and all my backup plans did. So I ended up coming back to the States with my family. And when we got back, I needed some way to support the family. We'd gone over to Germany with 2 kids and came back with 3. And so I ended up teaching at the Catholic high school in Binghamton, New York, and doing all those things, plus coaching as well. And then around 2009, I had been in touch with David, but kind of lost touch for a while, but I got back in touch with him in 2009, and he was updating me with what he was doing. And then in September of 2015, I got this very cryptic email from him that literally said the following: would you ever consider becoming the curator for manuscripts and papyri at Museum of the Bible? That was it. It was a Saturday morning. I was getting up. My cross-country team had a meet that day, and I sent him the response saying I would need more information. But all the way to the meet, I was going, oh, wow, what would this entail? I've been teaching high school for all these years. All of a sudden, getting back into a more academic pursuit. And my girls' team especially ran well that day. And I came back the whole time saying, nah, I can't give this up. I can't do that. But David knew how to bait the hook. He sent me a list of the manuscripts that we had in our collection in a spreadsheet on the following Monday. And yeah, that started everything. And so in December 2015, I flew out to Oklahoma City, which is where the headquarters was at that time. And I was given an offer, and I had till the end of the year to make up my mind. Basically from September to when I finally made up my mind, it was almost like being schizophrenic. I said yes, no, yes, no. But I finally thought, hey, who knows? If I turn this down, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what if. So I took a leap of faith. And, I had already figured out when I was going to retire from teaching. It would have been 2020, the COVID year. But, God threw me a curveball, and all of a sudden this opened up. So in June of 2016, we had our graduation on Friday night. Grades were due Monday. And on Tuesday, my wife and I set our sights on Oklahoma City. We headed west, started working for the museum there. I worked there on a bunch of different projects until they decided that they really needed me here in Washington, D.C. So in February of 2020, I was transferred here, and I arrived here and worked in the office 2 weeks, and then COVID shut everything down. So
you're the one that's responsible for that.
That's, I don't want that word getting out there. But yeah, it was, that brought me here. And for the last couple of years, I've been working on this project for the Shroud.
Yeah. So were there, what other kind of really interesting projects did you work on? And then we'll talk about the Shroud project.
Well, one of the main things that we do is that we work on the provenance of our artifacts. And so I've done a lot of provenance research, and I find all kinds of interesting stories. I'm always drawn to the history and the personal history of things. So, for example, we have this beautiful manuscript, which is actually two manuscripts, a book of hours and a psalter that are bound together, that were produced in the 14th century. And they belonged to Elizabeth de Boon, who was an English noblewoman. Her husband, William, was the grandson of Edward I and the nephew of Edward II. And their granddaughter actually married Henry Bolingbroke, who became Henry IV. And so they're the great-grandparents of Henry V. And all subsequent monarchs of England basically trace back to that point. So they are very influential in history. So there's this beautiful manuscript, beautiful illuminations in it. But in the Psalter portion, there's all this writing between the lines and in the margins. On the first 10 pages of it or so. And so I was kind of drawn to that, and there was a question asked, well, what relationship does this have to the text? And can it give us an idea of how the Boone family used this text? And I said, yeah, it has nothing to do with the Boones because the writing was 16th century, not 14th century. So a couple hundred years later, people were writing in the margins. And when I did my research, one of the strangest things that I found was I could figure out, after being able to decipher what it was saying and then putting that through Google search, I was able to come up with the fact that these were all quotes or paraphrases from a commentary on the Psalter that was actually printed from the 16th century in 1542 by a man by the name of Marcantonio Flaminio, who was he was in the circle of Reginald Powell, who was a Catholic cardinal, and he became Queen Mary's Archbishop of Canterbury. So I was able to locate who it was, and then that puts it all into the context of the English Reformation, which makes it very, very interesting piece of work. So that was one. A quick story about another. We have this 2-volume Greek gospel manuscript. It's called the Ussher Gospels, because in the 17th century, it belonged to James Ussher, who famously calculated the age of the universe using the Bible and King's lists and things like that. So when he died, his daughter gave this to the Trinity College Library, and it stayed there for about a half a century. And then in 1707, a guy by the name of Richard Bulkley, who's a scholar, checked it out to do some research on it, and he never returned it. He died, and it got caught up with all of his possessions, entered the market, and it finally came into the possession of the family of the Earls of Moira, the second of whom, Lord Rawdon, actually was a British Army officer who served in the Revolutionary War all the way from Bunker Hill to South Carolina. And so from 1775 to 1781. Now, the thing that I found so interesting about this, there's a great painting by John Trumbull of the Battle of Bunker's Hill, and it's the death of General Warren in the foreground. But you can see Rawdon leading the final charge up the hill. He was a very brave officer and earned praise from General Cornwallis for actually winning the battle for the British. But if you look at the painting, he's leading the charge and he's holding the British flag. Off to the left, there's all this gunfire that's going on. And what's going on in it is that a unit of Massachusetts militia were covering the retreat of the Americans. And one of the officers in there was a guy by the name of Jedediah Thayer, who is my wife Peggy's 5 times great grandfather. So when I found that out, I just said to her, "Hey, your ancestor was shooting at the owner of my book." That's just not right.
How funny!
So you can find all kinds of interesting stories like that.
Yeah, it's amazing how they're connected. The one thing that I get a kick out of is with papyrus a little different, but with parchment is, that parchment is from the skin, either of a sheep or a young cow or wherever. And what if you are going to reproduce a whole Bible with all of those pages, is how many animals you have to actually need to produce that one book.
Absolutely. There was a scholarly study done trying to estimate the number of animals that were slaughtered to make all these manuscript books from the Middle Ages, and it's in the tens of millions. So
It's kind of like then the animals that get slaughtered and sacrificed for the early Israelites. Then it's in the million.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that just I just find that astounding how much. But wow, that's really interesting how you're actually connected to that book. And so, do you think he had that book here in the U.S. when he was here, or did he have it with him?
Not likely, because it was his father who was the one who first purchased it, and then he inherited it from him. He didn't actually have the title of the Earl of Moira until a few years after the American Revolution. This guy, Lord Rawdon went on and became the governor of India for the British East India Company. And while he was there as the viceroy, they greatly expanded control of northern India up the trunk road and all. He also commissioned James Raffles, who purchased the island of Singapore. So a major British imperialist whose his life work affected the lives of millions of people owned this book.
Wow. Well, I've been to the Raffles Hotel in Singapore. Yeah. So just curious, when he purchased that book, how much do you think he paid for it kind of in today's dollars?
Oh, I have no idea. The thing is, I don't have the catalog for the sale. I do know that rare books in the 18th century, they were not selling for huge prices in what we would think. They were selling for maybe £10 to £200 or something like that, which in the 18th century, of course, would translate into a lot of money today. But it's really hard to say.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, even just having a book, any book, but certainly the Bible and what have you, and having had it, I guess it would have been, is it hand printed then, or hand transcribed? Or?
Handwritten, yes. It's written it's written in a very, very fine, small, minuscule cursive hand. It's an absolutely beautiful book.
Yeah, and how long do you think that scribe then would have taken to have written that book out?
Years, absolutely years. It's typically something like that, and this is just the four Gospels. To get it right, you have to plan out every page in advance. You have to lay out the page. You have to rule the page, and that all adds to time. And then you have to go back and you have to put in initials and any decorations, such as the miniatures. This has miniatures of the evangelists, and then it has to be bound. So you put the whole thing together. It's going to take at least a year to 2 years.
Yeah. Wow. It's fascinating, that whole process. And nowadays, I mean, even the transition to the Gutenberg Bible, which you have a replica press at the museum. I just find it fascinating. And even there, the amount of time and the challenge it is to actually set all the type, and not even writing it out, but actually to set the type and get that all right. It's just a fascinating process how that all comes together. Yes,
and that technology basically carried down into our lifetime before they started to get the more advanced ways of making the typesetting. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, anyway, let's move on to the Shroud, because that's certainly an enormous project. So tell us how that project came about.
Well, it actually started in about 2018 when a group of people, I believe Russ Brialt was one of them, and Myra Adams, and probably Cheryl White as well, began a series of talks with leadership here at the museum about the idea of having this exhibit. And we had to get funding for it, and when an anonymous donor appeared, then we could actually get everything into the works. I was assigned as the curator for this in October of 2019. So the entire time from when I started working on it to when it opened was about 28 months. So about as long as it takes to make one of those manuscript Bibles. And so, the process was I had to do an awful lot of research. It was like being in grad school again. But as it was going on, of course, COVID was a big issue because all the libraries were closed. And so everything I had to do online. I even tried to buy a couple of books from some foreign printers, and their offices were closed for COVID too. So I couldn't even buy books from them, even at exorbitant prices. I couldn't do it. But so I came out here in January 2020 for the conference that kicked off the official going. And it's at that point that I met with the person who was the exhibition project director, developer, Christy Walliver. And it was great because she had a lot of experience developing exhibits, and I had experience in researching. So the two of us worked very well together, and worked out a whole system of she would give me deadlines when I needed to have things written. I'd send them to her. She would have suggested edits. We'd send them back and forth. And after we were finally satisfied with what it said, then it went to our editorial staff. And then from there, it went up the line all the way up to Jeff Cloa, the chief curatorial officer. So everybody had comments, and so you get a lot of feedback along the way, and you got to fix this, you got to fix that, etc. So it was just coming up with it was one whole part of it. But as you know, when you look at it, I mean, it's the exhibit has a beautiful design, and we've got all of this high-tech interactive element as well. So that represents our team working with a lot of other teams within the museum. We worked with our creative team who developed a lot of the look of the interactives and all. We worked with, of course, our software development team who made some of the interactives. We worked with we had an outside design firm, Roto, from Dublin, Ohio, and they kind of came up with things that in many ways changed the exhibit. I had been thinking of it in very linear terms, and I think we all had here, but they suggested that more open floor plan that we eventually settled on. And that really opens it up and turns the whole focus onto the shroud itself. It doesn't bury it, because originally, if it had been linear, the shroud would have been all the way at the back of the gallery. So this took many months and lots of meetings, lots of laughs, and it was wonderful working with the creative people that we have here. And then, there's the logistics people as well. Our registrars, we had to set up all the loans for things that we were going to do, and then they had to see to it that everything was going to be there. And all of this was on the deadline of opening in February 2021. And then in December of 2020, it became clear that COVID was going to push it back. So we decided to push it back a full year. And in the end, everything worked to the benefit of the exhibit, because we were able to work on different things, make sure that we got everything looking just right. We had plenty of time for the installation of the exhibit, plenty of time to test all the interactives and all. So all in all, there was something like from the museum end, about 23 different people who had major roles in putting this together, plus a whole bunch of people kind of incidentally coming and going on it. So it was a huge project.
Yeah, well, and I think it really paid off. You've got some phenomenal things in there. I mean, the whole history and what have you. And then like I mentioned, I think I was most impressed with the linen replica of the shroud, and just seeing it laid out it's on the wall, and you can just sit and look at it. And I don't know, I was mesmerized. Mesmerized by that.
Well, a funny thing, a person that I gave a tour to just Monday morning, she said that she had actually been to Turin to see the shroud. And as you know, whenever the shroud is on public display, you're going to get huge crowds every single day. The statistic that I find mind-boggling is that in 1978, 150,000 people saw it each day, and that really hasn't changed much in any of the subsequent extensions. But she said that in 2000 she had a chance to see it, and they were back from the shroud about the distance from our replica to that bench where you could actually sit. And she said that they were actually kind of on a conveyor belt. And so you stand there and it kind of moves you right past. And so you just, you see it as much as you can, and then you have to move on. Whereas what we have there, you can get up very close and really examine it and see just see the detail in it. You can see the way in which it was made, and the image itself. Zoom in on areas and then stand back, because as Andrew Casper was saying in his talk on February 23rd, that a lot of people kind of described it almost as an abstract sketch, because when you're in close, you can't really take it all in. You have to get back from it to really see it. So here you have the advantage of being able to do that up close or back a ways, and you can stay there as long as you want. Until we get to the point where there are 150,000 people are coming through every day, then we'll have to do something about it. But right now, it's you've plenty of time to see it. Yeah. And incidentally, it's all the way through the spring and into the summer. It ends July 31st. So there's a lot of chance for people to come to see it and really take their time and look at it and absorb the message of what that image means.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely the message side, and then there's kind of the physical side of, there is the image and and the suffering that he went through. All of those whip marks, and then the nails and the spikes through his ankles and his wrists. It's incredible. My wife and I, we sat there during the launch, and we were probably there 20 minutes and just talking about each of the different things that you can see on there. So you have the image, and then you have the blood stains, and you have then the burn marks, and then you also have potentially wine stains and wax stains and little droplets here and there. It is just absolutely fascinating.
And when you look at that and you contemplate it, it was Pope John Paul II who said that when you look at that image, it's such a barbaric, such a brutal death, and you can't but help link it to man's inhumanity to man in the present. And as you're looking at that suffering, as it appears on the shroud, you see written there things like human trafficking and wars and mayhem and all that. So on the one hand, it's a brutal, tragic image, but on the other, it's also an image of love, because it ties directly to the whole idea that God so loved the world that he sent his only son, and that Jesus willingly accepted this death, this horrifying, brutal death, for us. And that is, again, it's just mind-blowing when you look at it and you see it there. Just the power of that image, and the face is so serene. That's the other thing. Despite all of this brutality, the face is serene. It's kind of like those last words, "It is finished."
Yep. Yeah, how true. And you are so right. When I look at it, you see the suffering and, like you said, the inhumanity of man to other men. And then on the other hand, you say, wow, this is the witness of the most important event in Christianity. And it's the resurrection. And for me, it's also the most, it's the worst thing possible. And then it's the absolute best thing possible. Mm-hmm. And that, I think you're right, that message that comes out of that when you're looking at the shroud is just phenomenal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So which element of the exhibit do you like the best? Or do you maybe not like the best, but found as being the most interesting?
Well, it's definitely my bias as an historian, and doing provenance research and looking at the human stories and all. I found in researching the history of the shroud is really where I was drawn into the story, right from the earliest documents, the documents from 1389. That when you put them all together, I translated the Latin and the Old French documents, and it tells this very strange story of how in the summer of 1389, right about the time when there's finally a break in the 100 Years' War that'll go on until the 15th century, that the Bishop of Troyes comes to the King of France and says that there's a problem in Lorraine, that they are displaying this cloth, and they're displaying it in such a way that that the clergy give the people the impression that this is definitely genuine. And he said, but it's only a painting. And so the king, to mollify the bishop, writes to his bailiff in Troyes and requests that he go and he sees the shroud. And we have this report from the bailiff that it did not go according to plan. And as I said the other night, it's like something out of Monty Python. That literally the bailiff goes there, the clergy are waiting for him, and they outfox him, and they just keep giving him a changing story. Well, you can see it if you go outside. Well, I have to seize it. Well, you can't seize it. Why? Well, it's locked up. And, they said, well, get the key. He said, well, we don't have the key. Well, where's the key? And you've got all of these crazy elements. And then the procurator, we call him the lawyer, so we don't have to explain what a procurator is, but the procurator of the bishop comes and he increases the pressure on the clergy. And there's this whole go around. And then all of a sudden, it's dinner time. And so they stop and they go away. And then what they do is after dinner, they come back and the argument picks up and goes absolutely as fruitlessly from that point on. Now, we took all of this and boiled it down into a script that's told in 6 spreads on what we call a magic book, that you really get a sense of the story as you turn the pages. And there are sensors embedded in the pages that are read by the projector and read into the computer, so that when you turn the page, the scene shifts and you get to a different part of the story. And everything is coming from the documents, with one exception. Because they go off and eat, I was curious what they ate, and I came across a French cookbook from 1393, so 4 years later, and it had banquet menus. And so I chose the most outlandish banquet and chose all the food that I thought would make kids my grandson's age go, ooh, and had that in there. And that's the only thing that really doesn't come from the documents of the shroud itself, but it's contemporary.
Yeah.
And so we have this magic book as a way to tell this very strange story. With that, it's the human element that I'm drawn to, and there's so many interesting stories. We broke the known history of the shroud into the three known owners: the de Charny family from Loire, France, the House of Savoy, who had it the longest, and now the popes. And by simplifying it and looking at it that way, there were themes that came up as to how the different owners used it. I think most striking, the House of Savoy, that they used it as the dynastic symbol, and ultimately used it to show the people of Turin that they had divine favor. And so it's a bit of a stretch, but since Victor Emmanuel II was a member of the House of Savoy, if you don't have this reinforcing of the House of Savoy that the shroud brings, you might not have a unified Italy. It's one of those things in history. A gross overstatement, but I'm no longer teaching, so I don't get graded on that.
and who knows exactly what happened in life. That's right.
But but the whole story of the shroud, it keeps coming back to outbreaks of plague and times of war, and the whole story of why it's in Turin. It was in Chambéry, France, which is where it was in 1532 when the fire damaged it. It was tied up with a plague that hit the city of Milan, and all the civil officials disappeared. And the Archbishop, Charles Borromeo, he took over. He ran the city. He tended the sick, and just kept everything going for 2 years. But he made this vow that if he survived and if the plague was lifted from Milan, he would walk to give thanks in front of the shroud. And so the Duke of Savoy, when he heard that, Borromeo was coming, he moved it from Chambéry across the Alps to Turin so that it would be there. And Borromeo wouldn't have to go over the Alps on foot. Now, fast forward to the present, in 2020 and 2021, on Holy Saturday, there have been live streamed virtual prayer services in the presence of the shroud, with the Archbishop of Turin leading it. And what they've done is they have prayed, talked about different parts of the shroud and the significance of the marks, and then interviewed nurses and doctors and COVID survivors, youth leaders, teachers, all discussing the terrible impact of COVID. And I find it amazing that historically, where did COVID first appear outside of China? It was in Borromeo's old archdiocese of Milan in northern Italy. And so once again, it seems to come back to this, that in a time of plague, people turn to the shroud and the meaning behind the shroud for comfort. Yeah.
No, and it is interesting how the that first case started in Milan, and then that's where Borromeo was fighting the plague and things like that. It just absolutely fascinating. I get a kick out of reading history too. I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with me, but I got interested in the shroud with one of Ian Wilson's books called The Blood in the Shroud, and it's just fascinating. When you have the documented history from the mid 1300s, and then you kind of have the undocumented but pieces that you can put together kind of as circumstantial evidence to say, how did it get all the way from Golgotha, Jerusalem, up to Constantinople, and then up to Lire, France. So,
Yeah, it's the hypothetical journey is something that we actually address as well. Looking at how it might have made its way from Jerusalem via Edessa to Constantinople, and then with the Fourth Crusade coming to France.
Yeah. And there's there's a handful of other theories out there. I kind of believe that the Edessa to Constantinople and then over to Lille, France is probably the one, but I don't think we'll ever know. I don't think it'll be possible, even if you came up with a book, written on parchment, having killed all those sheep, that actually says that I was the one that took it. We may or may not even believe it. So.
Well, I would caution you about that, because there was the incident of the Gospel of Jesus' wife.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, very good. That's very good. All right. Well, we're coming down to a close, but why don't you tell us about what the mission of the Museum of the Bible is?
Well, simply put, we believe that we want all people to engage with the transformative power of the Bible. And the way in which we approach this is to have our permanent exhibits, which are on 3 separate floors, address different aspects of this. So on our second floor, we talk about the impact of the Bible, both on America and on the world. And the third floor, we, as so many people have said, we realize that there's a certain amount of Bible illiteracy out there, that people just don't know the stories. And so we have the stories of the Bible are addressed there. We have the Hebrew Bible walkthrough, which is an award-winning exhibit to explain the stories in the Old Testament, so that people get that narrative. And then we have a New Testament theater that talks about the Gospels, but we also have an area there with the World of Jesus of Nazareth, which is a recreation of what a village in the Galilee might have looked like in the first century. And we have living history interpreters there in costume who stay in character the whole time, which is fun. And then on the fourth floor, we deal with the transmission of the text of the Bible to show how this text has traveled through time and space in many different formats, from the Dead Sea Scrolls up to an app on your phone, and different languages, translations, and all. We address the whole issue of translations and all. So that's the mission and how we approach it. The way that the Shroud of Turin exhibit actually fits into that is that we look at it in terms of the impact of the Bible. Ever since it first appeared in Lille in the 1300s, millions of people have come to see it. Millions of people, just almost 10 million in the 21st century alone. People come there. And why are they coming there? Well, it's because of the stories of the Bible. Pope John Paul II famously called the Shroud a mirror of the gospel. And how does it mirror that? We have another interactive where it's a touch table, where we have sensors embedded so that people who are blind or are sight impaired, they can run their hands over the table and feel the image, and so thus see it through the sense of touch. But when their hand strikes one of the sensors that's linked to a gospel passage, then they hear the actual the word itself. And we've got 25 different passages recounting different parts of the Passion narrative. We also have on that same table, we've also got other sensors that will tell you what this burn mark is, or what that watermark is, or this is where the radiocarbon sample was taken, so that people get a full experience of it. So that people are interacting with the stories of the Bible and seeing the impact of the Bible.
Yeah, I really like the that touch sensitive thing for the not only for the blind but also for the rest of us. And to me, I also thought about Pope John Paul's saying that the shroud mirrors the Gospels, and then you can, right there, you can actually feel how it mirrors the Gospels with what's in there, and not only the physical stuff with the wounds and things like that, but also the message that, here he is, he gave his life for us so that we would be saved. So really just phenomenal. Well, Brian, thank you so much. You've been awesome. I really appreciate it, and thank you for participating. And I think you've certainly helped me, and hopefully others, as they listen to this and understand more about the Shroud. And I hope as well that they are able to visit the Shroud and the Shroud exhibit at the Museum of the Bible. And definitely, if you get a chance, for everyone that is listening to this, is go to the Museum of the Bible. It is absolutely worth it. I've been there maybe 5 times, multiple hours each, and I still have not seen everything. For more information, exactly.
That's true.
It is true.
I work here and I haven't seen everything.
And even worse than that, it changes. You bring in new things. So yeah, fantastic. But anyway, for more information on Museum of the Bible, go to museumofthebible.org, museumofthebible.org, and there you can find out about what's there, what's going on, what are the events, and also you can buy your tickets there, so you can get ready and go. And otherwise, please stay tuned for more videos on this series on the backstory of the Shroud of Turin. And please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. Brian, thank you so much.
Guy, thank you so much. This has been an awful lot of fun. And, we've got the maroon thing going together in Germany as well. So.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Brian.